How did it start? Just some little comic sitting in his little den during a little pandemic saying, anybody out there in Facebook land? And I pushed live and 500 people showed up, which says, A, I'm super popular, or B, they were super bored. Whatever happened, it continued and continued until that little "how you doing, folks" turned into a tiny little podcast all by my lonesome on my lap. That ended up being in front of my bookshelf. What ended up being inside of this shell that wasn't even enclosed, that became enclosed, that became heated, that became having my son jump in, and next thing you know, it's a brand new podcast that actually has been picked up by Salem Network. It's a professional podcast, all because of you. Well, because of me, but because of you helped. And you helped by your commitments, your donations, and now we are moving into the AAA, almost to the major leagues, because once you get paid, you're a pro. So folks, welcome to your first time, your third time, or your 500th time to Brad Stine Has Issues. Let the anthem rain. Hey, it's me, God's comic Brad Stine. This is Brad Stine Has Issues, where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. I am Brad Stine, but I made out of whole cloth my son, Wyatt Leroy Stine. He wouldn't exist except for me. Son, do you feel better knowing that I made you even though you didn't exist until I decided?
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to say up until about the 28th loin joke. Yeah. After that, no.
Yeah, but still, I mean, does it seem surreal that you literally exist? You have a conscience, you have volition, you have a free agency, you have a soul, you have the ability to spend eternity in heaven if you believe in Jesus, or in hell if you don't. You have the ability to use logic and reason, inductive and deductive reasoning. You have the chance to have a free will, unless you're a determinist or an atheist that believes that everything is just designed by synapses in your brain, which means you don't have a free will, including the ability to believe you don't have a free will and to change your mind and think you do. All of that is determined. You can either be that crazy or you can believe that you actually have agency. But none of that, Wyatt, none of what I just said that you've pulled in and it created a coherent ability to communicate, it would exist without me deciding to make you. I just wonder if that feels weird.
Well, you didn't decide to make me. You decided to make someone who just so happened to be me.
Well, true. I can't say that it was like God came to me and with like a lottery or like a book that I got to go through. You choose. It's not. I don't even know.
There was no Sears catalog you flipped through.
Not that. Now I had a Sears catalog growing up. You never even saw such a thing. But there is an equivalent nowadays, and this might fit more your age group and genre. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a Lego store in the mall in Nashville, and you can actually create your own face, your own body, and make your own little Lego man that looks just like you. And so it's kind of like that. You get to kind of make the choice. So nobody came to me and said, hey, you want to make a little Lego figure that really is a real human?
Oh, perfect. Finally. Some place that will allow me to create myself with my yellow, completely plasticky skin. You know, there was very little representation for yellow-skinned plastic people.
Yeah, they're marginalized. And so that's what I'm saying, is that what I appreciate about Lego store is their desire to give a voice to the voiceless, to give a skin to the yellow, to give a body to a half an inch taller. These are people that really are reaching out to those who have taken marginalized to a whole new level.
Something like that. Also, it's just fun to build them. I like building them.
You have one, right?
I have at least one.
And that is you?
Yeah, they got me.
And what do you do with them?
Just stare at it.
Stare at it for what length of time?
Depends. Minutes, hours. Days.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get it. Depends.
I mean, it's me, but plastic and not.
Well, listen, I get it. There's days when you feel like staring at yourself in plastic and miniature. There's days when you don't. And Wyatt, who am I to judge? Who am I to take you to task for that? That's your ideas. Folks, we have an incredible guest on today. But Wyatt, do we ever have a non-incredible guest on?
You?
Well, I'm not a guest, though. I'm a host.
Oh, okay, fine. Fair enough.
Yeah.
No.
So, always our guests are incredible. This guy is an interesting guest. He's a little different. He's not a believer in Jesus. I am. You are, son, but he's not. And I still have him on because I want everybody on my podcast that is interesting. He's interesting because he's a professor, a doctorate in rhetoric. He's a rhetorician. Do you know what rhetoric means, Wyatt?
Rhetoric, words, like sentence. Rhetoric, I know what it means. I just can't describe it.
Well, that's
which I guess means I don't know what it means.
Yeah, it means you don't know what it means. You don't have the.
But I have heard it before.
You don't have the rhetoric to describe a rhetorician, and that simply means someone who can, in fact, utilize language to communicate, to try to garner access to reality by communicating through words. And insight and wisdom through communicating using words. A rhetorician, or if you abuse them, a propagandist, if you use them in colloquial versions, you're using idiosyncratic terms and whatever that are for the area, or maybe you have a particular affectation like you are from England and suddenly you're going to speak with sort of an accent that might prepare you to believe that you're some sort of English. This is a rhetoric, but it's from England. It's not from us, but that's another option. But this guy, his name is Dan French, and we had a 2-hour interview. Did not expect it to go that long, but if you guys remember Tom Ryan, the comedian that was on the Letterman show that I had on, he said, you got to go speak to this Dan French because he'd be in. I was just on his show, and I think you'd really enjoy him. And I did. And we went for 2 hours. And what's interesting is the first hour was really the idea of communication. So that's why people like you who are out there, I don't know people that like to communicate. Ashley Haas does. I know she says she takes notes. You familiar with Ashley Haas, Wyatt?
A little bit.
How do you know her?
You had her on the podcast. You called her in the middle of it.
That's what it was. I knew I recognized the name. I couldn't think of where. I thought maybe she worked at the 7-Eleven and she was the one that gave me the Slurpees. I don't know. I mean, I meet so many folks, son. I meet so many people.
I was trying to talk. Unfortunately, our
rhetoric crossed paths.
We crossed the rhetoric streams. You're not supposed to do that, I think, is what Ghostbusters said.
Right. You never cross rhetoric streams.
It's a weird movie.
It is a weird movie, but I like it. Do you? The original?
I love it. Yeah, it's a great one.
Oh, it's a great movie. Well, listen, here's the thing. I have a special guest, Dan French, but we've decided to do something we don't do all the time, but we're going to split it into two because it's a super long interview. It's like 2 hours long. And it's like, that's too much for these people. There's people like Karen Boyd that stays up the whole time, or Nick Kress, and these are human beings that have jobs in the morning, Wyatt, and I just feel like it's abusive to them to force them to have to sit through the whole thing because they're so locked in now. They become such fans and such integral parts of the episodes that if they take off, people will consider them traitors and that they've abandoned us, and then nobody will like them anymore. And Wyatt, I don't want that responsibility.
Well, too bad. You're the host of the show. So the responsibility wants you.
But if they leave, why is it my fault?
Because you're the host.
All right, well, if you're going to give me all that much weight...
No, I'm just saying, that's just the way the world works. You took the risk, you set this up, you're the one who takes the fall if it doesn't go well. I'm just the disembodied voice who gets a paycheck every month to barely know how to press buttons.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right to me.
It doesn't seem right to you, but yeah, it seems right to me.
Yeah, to you it does, because you're the one getting the paycheck. I haven't stayed. I haven't got a paycheck yet from my podcast, Wyatt. And I'm grateful that my son is here. You're my sidekick. You deserve your producer, sidekick, editing, time-consuming efforts to this amazing podcast that has now gone professional. We're about to be next month in March on the Salem broadcast podcast network. We're on Spotify and whatever, but I mean, so it's actually going to generate a little income if people watch it, Wyatt. So I feel like that's a lot of pressure, and I feel like this time the pressure should be on you. That if it tanks, I can just say it was Wyatt. They loved me, but they said the sidekick was lacking. They said, what happened to my, are you cutting my mic?
No, I'm just trying to make it sound like it's not an echo chamber or headphones.
Yeah, well, that's good. I don't.
So echo chamber? Not echo chamber.
Yes.
Echo chamber? Now, you see, this would be a much better effect to do if the audience could actually hear the echo, which they cannot. So, as far as they're concerned, we'll just echo, not echo for 2 minutes.
Well, when I speak like right now, for example, I don't hear it in my headphones at all.
Yeah, and now, neither do I.
Okay, so now what are we doing? I don't even understand what's happening. We were talking, and now suddenly I don't want to talk because I can't hear myself.
Oh, fine, I'll turn it back.
Check,
all right,
check.
There's the echo. Have fun with it.
Well, it's not an echo. You mean it has more of a hollow?
It is literally, yeah, it's a hollow echo in my earphones.
Ah, so it does echo, come back and forth?
In my headphones.
Because it doesn't mind.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm trying to change that. Are you not getting with the program?
I got you. Well, speaking of the program, we're going to get to the program quickly. This is going to be 2 special episodes this Monday, tonight, and next Monday. So, as you can see, I don't have an iPad. We don't have time for that because we have such a special announcement because Salem has taken Brad Stine Has Issues international as we end up on their podcast in the next few weeks where you actually will be able to have access to them. That should bring people onto the podcast that aren't currently here right now as we speak. Now, I don't know how many. It's going to take time for people to be aware of it, and not everybody wants to watch live. We've already figured that out. But people will start jumping on that we've never had before, and people are going to – I'd love to get thousands and thousands on. I don't know that will ever happen, but if it does, it's going to be harder to find Nick Kress for him to come on first. He's St. Nick. Karen Boyd, we're going to have to get Paula Fay, Marie Rauchi, we're going to have Cindy Haas. We're going to have Stan Stinson. We're going to have Benjamin Gregory. We're going to have all these folks that we're going to have to try to seek out and find. But Wyatt, they're going to be inundated with people from all over the world jumping in and trying to take over their status. So I don't know. I'm concerned. I'm nervous. I think there's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth, and it has nothing to do with me. Remember, I'm now blaming you for everything that goes wrong now that we're going into the major leagues.
What do you mean now?
Well, but now it matters because actually there'll be a lot of people that'll hear about it, and so
yeah, but they don't want this section though. The audience on Salem ain't gonna hear it. They just hear the interview, which I have no control over.
Good point. Well, listen, what we are doing, and you guys should know that, is that as we move into the Salem Network, what we're going to have to do, we're going to cut it to the big intro for the guests, because all these are brand new consumers of Brad Stine Has Issues. So they don't know me yet. They don't know, but they are interested in the guests. They have a little bit more clout than me for some. Now, some people know me and might be interested. Oh, I know him. Let's go see what he's got to say. But we're going to cut it to just basically a really quick intro and exciting about who's coming up, and then cut right to the into the actual interview. So that's kind of where it's going. And what they want to do is that when they start building people, those people can jump over and find out, there's a longer episode if you come over to the Facebook or the YouTube archive, or you can watch live on Monday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard. So that's where we're going to get some folks, because suddenly we're going to be in front of potentially thousands of people. And so if anybody wants to join our little group, so be it. Speaking of joining a group, if you've noticed, I got a special headgear on that I don't want. I want it, but I don't normally wear it. And it is a Militia of the Mind headgear. Looks like this. So it's pretty amazing. And it says right here with this patch, Mighty 10,000. It means that you joined the Mighty 10,000. You're one of the first 10,000, the first 10,000 people that have joined the Militia of the Mind, which is where you get this mug, Mighty 10,000, BradStine.com. But that is our logo, the stacked M, Militia of the Mind, inside of a thought bubble, because it's Militia of the Mind. That's our little logo. And this is the giant logo, Militia of the Mind, thought bubble. And there it is. This is the shirt you can purchase if you join the $3 a month Mighty 10,000. It's $3 a month, $36. You can also buy a shirt and we'll send it out to you. But if you join the Special Forces, you get a free signed shirt from me, God's Comic Brad Stine, with your number added to right here. And if you've noticed, I have signed and numbered this one, Militia of the Mind, Mighty 10,000, number 0, because I'm the first one, because I invented it. So this is my shirt. Let you see what it looks like in case you all want to have one of your very own and jump in with us. But if you join the 199, then you get access to every one of my videos for free. You can download on your computer. They're yours forever. Do with them as you please. You also get a hat. You also will get a Militia of the Mind signed with your number. You'll also get a mug that will be signed with your number. So and a sticker too if you want to use that. And so you'll also get the back catalog. In other words, you can go back all of the guests that have a special bonus question that only you get to access to, and eventually, and as those of you who are fans and have been with me for a long time know, it's been a slow roll because Wyatt and I have had to do it all by ourselves, and Wyatt and I are a couple idiots. So it takes us a long time to accomplish anything. We're doing it little by little, step by step, but we're getting there. And you guys, of course, help make it happen by your donations and by joining the Militia of the Mind, because that $3 a month is not enough. But with 10,000 people joined, man, we can do miracles. And that's what we're shooting for here soon. Militia of the Mind are people that believe in their faith. They believe that this country is great and should be fought for. They believe in First Amendment rights first and foremost. They do not believe in a lack of having borders on your or sovereignty of your nation. They don't believe that oligarchs and technocrats should be able to censor this. We want to destroy that concept, that you should be able to hate what somebody believes, but demand they have access to speak it. That's free speech, and free speech does not count unless it's speech you hate. If you don't give that an audience, you don't believe in free speech. And if you don't believe free speech, you are a bigot. You are a despot. You are a totalitarian. You are a slave master. And we don't want people like that ruling the world, and yet that's what they're trying to do. So this is kind of a special two-part series. I am also on the road right now. I am in Pennsylvania doing a whole 5-day tour, so you can go to bradstine.com and see where I'm going to be. But go to bradstine.com, join up, name, email, join up. You don't have to join. You can just give us your name and email. So if anything ever happens to me, nudge, nudge, I'll be able to contact you, and you'll still be able to get my content, because we're trying to defend my ability to exist no matter what technocracy, how would you say that, tries to destroy me. But maybe they won't. I don't know what's going to happen. Life throws you curveballs, but God is on the throne, and that's who I'm trying to defend, his story. So this is what we're looking for. So we have a special announcement for today. I actually, now that the shirts are here and everything's ready to roll, I signed personally, as I told you I would, the first 2 Militia of the Mind shorts. I just said shorts. I don't know why. It sounds like Schwartz or shorts, but it should say shirts, but I made it shorts. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm speaking in tongues. So if there's a charismatic out there, you can interpret.
Or maybe you're saying this so that I'll cut this out if we ever needed to use it for something.
I won't. Nice, Wyatt. I like how you kind of threw that little snide remark in at the end. Just
Yep, that's what I'm here for.
You're Mr. Snide. Well, here's the thing. I'm number 0, but Wyatt, if I'm not mistaken, we have me signing number 1 and number 2. So I'm sure you guys are curious. Well, who is the Mighty 10,000 signed first shirt number 1? Maybe you can guess, but I want them first, Wyatt, if you would show them the clip of me signing the first shirt and actually numbering it number 1. And, well, let's just start there. Here is God's Comic, and here we go. The first shirt to be signed from the Militia of the Mind, number 1, Mighty 10,000. Self-signed, here we go. This is number 1. It's kind of tricky to sign, I'm realizing, because it moves, but I'm doing my best. So give me a little grace if you could. Here we go. I'll have to work on that. It's going to be a little rough, but hey, you got the first one. We'll figure it out. God's Comic 2024. Here it is. Number 1 of hopefully 10,000 more. It's going to be sent to the number 1 Mighty 10,000, first signer upper. And they're going to wear it. They're going to take a picture of themselves, and we're going to put it right here just now on the podcast. And hopefully the rest of you will join us. Yeah, it costs a few bucks, but it's helping the podcast grow, helping all of this ministry grow. And we can fight together for freedom, liberty, and for God Almighty. See how it pans out. But at least the first one is on its way. Thanks. So there I was. You just saw the number 1 Militia of the Mind, number 1 of 10,000. Got signed, got sent, and now, drum roll, please. By the way, my son's an actual drummer, so he'd do this a lot better than me, but he's not here. We are now going to show a photo of the person, number 1 Militia of the Mind, wearing that shirt for the first time. Who is it? Why, believe it or not, who would have guessed? It is... Show 'em, Whitey!
Ta-da!
I'll be ding-donged if it ain't Saint Nick Kress is number 1 of the Militia of the Mind of the Mighty 10,000. Well done, Nick. This man has been with me from day 1. He has donated more money than anybody to help this podcast. He has shown up to the live events when he could. He has tried to just be part of this and be loyal, and I'm so grateful for him. He has done such great work. But let you know that anybody that joins the Special Forces, the 199, you will get a video of me signing your shirt, and then when you put it on, you will have your picture on this podcast, and the podcast is growing up, so if it turns into a big giant podcast that thousands and millions see, you will be on it. But it can't stop there, Wyatt. This is a special day. So if I'm not mistaken, you've got another video of me signing number 2. And when I say number 2, it also means that it could have people taking it the wrong way. So I mean it literally as the number dose, as opposed. I think you get the idea. Nevertheless, Wyatt, if you would, show them me signing number 2 shirt. So here we are. God's Comic Brad Stine and signing of the Militia of the Mind t-shirts that are now here. These are high-end ones. They're the ones that you have to pay extra for, but they also get the signed signature, and we are going in for the first 2 of hopefully 10,000. Let's get one right here. Watch closely as I am now signing number 2 and my name. Not easy to do, but that's how you do it on shirts. It's going out, number 2, and shortly we're going to see the person wearing it. They're going to send me a photo. We'll put it right up here on the podcasts, and you'll get to see who got to be number 2. Keep it coming. Join the Mighty 10,000. You'll get your own shirt. See you. So, you've now seen number 2 signed, and I'm guessing a pattern. I'm guessing if you're loyal fans, you're probably guessing what happened, who happened, where that happened, and who gets it. But sure enough, we got a photo, so you get to see, you saw me sign it, now you get to see who's wearing it, who is the number 2 of the 10,000 Militia of the Mind. White, if you would, son, make her show up. Of course, it's Karen Boyd. They have been so committed to this podcast and been so nice and kind to me. They never had to do it. They just wanted to, and they believed that this was something they wanted to be participants in. Remember that people that participate in something that has some value, some fruit, gets a piece of that reward in the long run. Believe it or not, God actually rewards people, and I can't believe it. I'm humbled that anybody would want to be part of anything I do. I know that sounds, I don't know, that I'm pandering, but I'm not. It always shocks and amazes me to find that people would actually care about me. But then again, I have to be careful, because the truth is I was called by God, I believe, because I believe in God, to be a voice to America at this time in space as a comic, as someone who stands deeply on free speech principles, stands deeply for the idea of being unapologetic about your faith, about your belief in freedom, and about America, not as a perfect country, Lord knows, but as one that's always tried to get better. And it's being destroyed, it's being torn apart, it's being invaded, it's dying as we speak. It's a very real, evil, dark thing that's happening to us. But as long as we're still here and have a chance, you go down swinging. You have to pray. And, you know, it's interesting. At my church this past Sunday, there was a man from Uganda. It's a church that we sponsor and help grow, and they're really growing a bunch of churches and schools all over in Uganda. And I went up to him after his speak at my church, and I said to him, you know, I've been praying for the persecuted church for many years, and I was praying for Africa, and I always prayed for Nigeria, because there's a genocide of Christians in Nigeria by Muslims who are just butchering these people. And it's like, and I said to him, can't they defend themselves? Can't they? And he said, no, the government won't let them have weapons. They cannot defend themselves. And I said, so, but do you believe that they should be able to? And here's somebody that lives in Africa, lives there. I asked him, who else should I pray for? He says, pray for Somalians. They also are being butchered. He said, pray for the Congo. There's tribal warfare there. But he lives there. He's actually had to endure people who will kill you for your faith. And I said to him, you know, what do you believe? And he said, just let the Holy Spirit tell you what to do. I said, so would you defend yourself? I said, I would let the Holy Spirit tell me. It could change. He might tell you to defend yourself once. He might tell you to go hide once. He might say, it's your turn to die. Who wants to hear that? But what if God said that's what's going on? Just like we watched ISIS cut off the heads of Christians who said, we're believers. We're not going to deny our brother in Christ. We're not going to deny our God. This is why we signed up. We don't want this, but God has asked for it, so we're going to share in the suffering. This is what we're not used to hearing in Christianity in America, but here's where we sit. I want to fight for third great awakening. I want to fight that this doesn't come to this, but it might. And then you're going to have to pray to God, what do you want me to do? What am I supposed to do? So I'm fighting with the militia of the mind. I don't want it to be bloodshed. I don't want it to be weapons. I want it to be free speech and reasoning, and hopefully you believe in that too. So we're kind of having a telethon. I just showed you what it looks like. If you want to buy a shirt that I sign, you can go do that. If you join the Special Forces, it comes for free. Otherwise, you have to buy it, but it's the only way we can afford this thing to grow. But hopefully soon it will take off to such a degree that we'll be able to have lots of more impact worldwide as we have more time to do editing and the things that will get us onto social media, everything that we're trying to do, that Wyatt has done kind of on volunteer basis until I've been able to pay him a little bit out of my own pocket to help my son out because of his devotion to this, that it turns into something that just really makes an impact. That's why I'm here. That's what I'm trying to do. And so, you know, what I'd ask for you guys, and you've all been here, you're loyal, so you've already signed up for the most part. Most of you are already Mighty 10,000s. God bless you. But here's what I'd like. It's kind of like a telethon. Like, if you guys will go out and find people that say, hey, why don't you go join? It's only $36 for a year. But I'm trying to get these emails. I want to be able to contact you guys if something ever goes haywire. And the only way I can do that is email, your cell phone. It's all there. It's all protected. But I can get stuff to you if I need to do that. So I'm looking at this like a telethon. Anybody that gets me 7 people, and you can show me, like if you say, hey, I got 7 people, and you send me their names, you can email me on Brad Stine, I think on my contact list on bradstine.com. You can say, hey, here's 7 people that signed up, and we can verify it because it will come into our account. But you got them, then I will send you a free shirt for sure. So you'll get a free shirt for that I'll sign in with your number on it, because we all have all the numbers when you sign. So you'll have your own number. And as long as you are there every year for 36, then you're part of this. You're part of this militia of the mind. So if you get me 7, I'll send you a free shirt. If you've already signed the special force and got your shirt and still get me 7, then I'll send you something else. But we're trying to still grow this thing. Just because I get on suddenly doesn't mean suddenly they're paying me money. They're not paying me jack. You still have to build it yourself. It just gives me a platform and gives me a better shot at this thing growing. You're still here. You're still fighting with me. So I've decided to spend these 2 episodes with the same guy, since it's a 2-hour one. See if that helps keep it a little bit shorter, a little bit more concise, make this kind of a telethon to help grow it, and show you the first 2. And you guys, like I said, will get to have that privilege of watching your signing, and you're wearing it on the podcast if you jump in. So we're going to go to this special guest. He will define himself, but it's going to be a very interesting for you, because it's kind of teaching you how to think, how to speak, how to reason, how to debate, how to believe in what you believe in and articulate it and be able to navigate it. This is so important for you as a believer, as an American, as someone who believes in free speech. If you do, how do you defend it in the public domain? How do you become a militia of the mind member, a Mighty 10,000, defending truth and doing it unapologetically, defending your faith unapologetically? This is what I'm trying to help you learn from this 2-part episode with Dan French. So go find me those 7 folks so I can get you a shirt. Join up, sign up. Please get me as much people on board as possible. Let's see if this thing can turn into the #1 Christian podcast in the world. Let's shoot for that, because if we pull that one off and you guys are still hanging on, we will be laughing our chops off going, can you believe what God has done with a bunch of knuckleheads like us? So God bless you for being here. God bless you for watching as usual. And let's see part 1 of this very unique episode with Dan French, rhetorician. Enjoy yourself and come away a little smarter for doing so. Let's roll. For all of you out there who watch Brad Stine Has Issues, I know that most of you are either fans or you are curious. And why did most of you land on my podcast? Because I'm a comedian. So you accidentally stumbled upon some of my comedy on the internet or YouTube, or it was sent to you via PSYOP or through the dark web. I have ways of getting my material into your subconscious. Some people think it's AI. I think it is. I have access to things you guys will never even know, and I'm not allowed to tell you about it because of my depth of interaction with people that you're just not ready to learn about, but you will someday. It'll be too late by then. But I just find that one of the things about comedy that I love, and I've said this to you guys a million times, is comedy historically have been the guys that could make fun of the king and not get their head cut off. We were the ones that made the monarchy and the peasantry inequality. In other words, there was a moment for a second we got just to be humans and explore the human experience together without a class system. So it really has a special place in culture if it's used properly. Of course, a lot of that's trying to be destroyed by leftism, which hates being mocked, ridiculed, and it certainly hates free speech, because then you're not controlled. Whoever controls the words of a people control the people, because you literally are told how you can behave, how you can think, and how you can move with volition if somebody controls the words. So that's why this is so important. And a couple of weeks ago, you guys remember I had my old comedian friend Tom Ryan on with Stine Has Issues, and we had a great talk about comedy and our history and life. But the thing that was most interesting to me about Tom that I wanted you guys to see during this podcast was that him and I have polar opposite ideological or philosophical or political points of view. And what I said to you guys was, that's good. A conversation of diametrically opposed views is much more interesting than one where people are all speaking to each other about what they already agree with. Because if I only talk to people that agree with me, I don't need them. I'll just talk to myself. So I like to bring on guys that have different points of view, but show that you can agree to disagree agreeably, and that there is ways to be civil and have robust conversations. It's interesting. It's fascinating. It's what makes us human. So Tom, after the finishing of my time with him, and of course he had to get back into therapy immediately thereafter. I have a way of driving people into broken places. But anyways, he said, I got a guy that I just did a podcast with that I think you're going to really enjoy, and I would recommend you get with him. And so I said, okay, who is it? And he told me his name. His name is Dan French. I didn't know Dan. So I did a quick research on him and found out that he was a comic. And I was like, well, cool. Now, I'm not in the clubs much anymore, so I don't know who the guys are anymore that I used to. But he's a comic. But more importantly, and why I'm really interested in talking to him, is he's an expert on rhetoric. And rhetoric is my bread and butter. Literally, comedians make money and a livelihood because of words and the access to them and the delivery system of them in ways that make people chuckle. So I'm going to bring him on. I don't have all the deep background bio of him, and I'm going to do what I always do with my guests. I'm going to let him describe himself in his own words in the way he wants to be thought of during this interview on his own terms. And as a man of rhetoric, I'm sure he'll do it quite precisely. So please welcome to Stine Has Issues, Dan French. How are you, my friend Dan?
Brad Stine. I'm good, man. I'm doing well. You're in Nashville?
I am in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm in a little hut that used to simply be an open space over my garage, and I cobbled it into a studio, because that's the beautiful thing about the internet is you can give the illusion you're successful.
Yes, it's not hard to just throw up some pictures of you smiling and video and look at that, man. This guy has a great life.
Yeah, and it's an illusion. I'm on the brink of ending it all, but nobody knows, and that's the beauty of the internet is you can put on a good face until you hear about it later in the obits. But I was really interested in you because of Tom Ryan, and so before we move into those spaces, as you heard in the intro, I want you to introduce yourself. And I don't just read bios like everybody does, because honestly, Dan, I've stood in front of so many opportunities to speak and perform where they read your bio, literally the whole thing. And
right.
You're like, please stop already. I don't even care. You literally hear it going, I don't even care that, and I don't even know I did that stuff. So it doesn't interest me. I think what's more interesting to me is letting the guests say, here's kind of who I am. Here's how I see myself. Here's what I want you to think about as we interact. So why don't you just tell the people in your own words, however long you want to take, who you are and why, you interact in the cultural milieu in the way that you do.
The milieu. I love the milieu.
Yeah, don't we all?
Getting out there, wading into the milieu. Yeah, so my background, I'm actually from Louisville. So I've been to Nashville many, many times. I'm originally from Kentucky. But the way to think about me is I have two careers. I have a comedy career. So I started as a stand-up, moved into late night writing. I wrote for Letterman and Dennis Miller and Late Late Show.
Like on staff? You were a staff writer with those
I was
guys?
a staff writer, yeah.
Nice.
Not for Letterman. Letterman, I was a submission writer. I was a staff writer for his other show, The Late Late Show.
Okay.
So back in the day. And so hardcore comedy writer. I still do stand up. Last year I did 175 days on cruises,
Wow.
going around the world trying to make old people laugh. So yeah, comedy career, hardcore. That's where I know Tom Ryan. Met him in the clubs in Florida probably 25, 30 years ago.
You must know Greg
So
Otto.
yeah, I know all those guys.
Yeah, Greg was on the cruise ships for years, so I figured you guys must have known each other.
Well, last year's the first year I ever did cruises, and I only did it for a year. I think that's plenty. I enjoyed it, but it's a very different lifestyle.
Yeah.
I met a guy there who was a puppeteer who lived in Portugal and had done it for 44 years. Can you imagine that, being on boats?
No, I can't, because I went on one cruise in my entire life. I was hired to perform. So they gave me a little cabin that had a sliding glass door with a tiny little veranda, whatever you would call it. So I could open the door and I could sit. There was no space, just two chairs. But I could go outside, out in the middle of the ocean or whatever, leave the door wide open for a week, which I did, just to hear the ocean, smell it.
Sure.
And so I thought, this is kind of sweet and beautiful. And then I realized that a vast majority of the folks on this cruise don't have that. They have like a window or nothing. And I'm going, that would be the creepiest, most horrific trip there could be. So I don't know. My guess is they don't treat or give the estate rooms to the talent. So I don't know if I would enjoy that so much. But anyways.
Yeah, interesting. But yeah, so hardcore comedian. The other side of my life, I've always run these careers simultaneously. I was a professor. So I have a PhD in rhetoric.
Nice.
And I was professor during the week, comic on the weekends, and on the summer and during breaks. So I ran those careers together. And again, like you said at the beginning, rhetoric it's the art of messaging, of effective messaging. So it applies to comedy. Like, how do you create a routine that works for your audience? And it applies to politics. How do you go after and talk to people that you want to convert, that you want to do persuasion on? And rhetoric is the old Greek word for persuasion. It literally means persuasion, effective messaging in ancient Greek. And the Greeks designed it. They invented it at the same time they invented democracy.
Okay.
Because it turns out when you give a lot of people the right to vote, everybody starts trying to influence how everybody votes. And so they start studying that. Aristotle wrote the first book on rhetoric, on persuasion, and basically said rhetoric is the ability to see every form of persuasion and choose the one that's going to work best in that situation. And so if you study rhetoric, if you study persuasion from the viewpoint of rhetoric, you start back with the Greeks and you study all the persuasion theory up till now, which super applies, of course, to right now in our politics and what's going on as people try to talk to each other, try to figure out where you want this country to go or not go. And I enjoy being in the middle of that.
Mm. Well, so tell me, so you start with the Greeks. So that's a perfect starting point because they gave us logic and reason and formal logic and philosophy, Western style anyways. But it's literally what's created most of the way that we engage in humanity, frankly, at this point, and how it applied to so many other the hard sciences or soft sciences anyways. So do me a favor, since this is your expertise, help us understand, how does rhetoric, especially formal rhetoric, coincide, or how does it engage with what the Greeks were known as, gave us, the sophists? Explain to me where those interact.
So the way rhetoric began, the sophists were the first organized teaching of rhetoric, or the first organized teachers. That's literally why it's called sophistication, being sophisticated, is because it started in the courts, actually, even before politics, where they would study the way people would argue court cases. And they realized that it wasn't always about whether somebody was right or wrong or innocent or guilty. It's how well you argued. And a certain set of techniques seemed to work. And so they studied those, abstracted those, and then began to teach those for money, typically to the wealthy and the wealthiest kids, which is the way education usually starts, because you can actually pay the teachers. And then Aristotle came along and formalized his understanding of rhetoric. And Plato came along and was basically, I don't really agree with this, but it's the way it's taken historically. Plato was against rhetoric. He thought it was too constructed. He was more about dialogue and dialectic. He's like, get in there, talk to each other before you make up your mind. Rhetoric tends to make up its mind first and then try to take that message out to others. So that's where it kind of all started with, again, democracy freed up a lot of power. And that's kind of what's happened today. Is power has now been freed up out of sort of monolithic network TV, 3 channels, lots of gatekeepers. Now, with the internet and everything else, power has been distributed so people can get into the public. I mean, you're in the public. You've got followers. You've got people who listen to this. You would never be able to get onto Cronkite, especially not for an hour, 2, 3 hours. And so it's really changed the dynamic of how rhetoric is used these days. But the same principles apply. Like you talk about argument and logic and reason, and that is one area of persuasion. And it's a very useful one, but it's a difficult one to do well. It's a technology that breaks really fast. Mm-hmm. So when people try to argue with each other, they just lock up very quickly. First of all, nobody gets trained in rhetoric. Nobody gets really trained in logic.
Yeah.
And so it's a tough technology to use.
So when the reason I brought the sophist is because normally when you hear that term used, it's pejorative. It seems as though, in my understanding, it wasn't, because you're a doctorate, you said, in sophistry. So obviously this is your bailiwick. So I'm curious. I was not quite completely clear on the sophist, but what I felt like I was gathering from them, or what we had, those who had, did you say it was Aristotle that had problems with them, was that it wasn't so much that they weren't good at what they did. In other words, they were experts in presenting an argument and a persuasion. Nothing wrong with that. But that they were a gun for hire. So they would choose either side. It's like, who do you want? Well, yes, I believe it's wrong. Let's take a hot button issue. Abortion's wrong. You're killing a baby. And here's my 1 hour proof of that with rhetoric. And then the next day, you know what? I really want to have an abortion. Well, I can, if you pay me, I'll give a wonderful dialectic on why abortion is good for society. And they literally just really were good at persuasion, even if they didn't have the integrity to necessarily agree with what they were saying. Now, am I misunderstanding them, or is that just kind of a disparaging moniker placed upon them, or was that kind of what they were? Just whatever side you want, you pay me like a defense lawyer, and I'll take your side. Is that inaccurate or not?
No, I think that's a great instinct on it. So traditionally, the sophists were slandered by Plato, which is really kind of interesting, because Plato said he didn't like rhetoric, and then he went and slandered the sophists with rhetoric.
Yeah. Well, in Plato, give me...
Basically claimed that they were pure technique.
Yeah. Okay. So there was no... so are you saying that what he was saying was there was no integrity, presuppositional, foundational commitment to the idea that virtuously that this was worth defending because they believed in it? They didn't really land anywhere. They were just sort of open to whomever would pay them. I'm just want to make sure I understand exactly what the problem was with them, or why they're thought of sometimes as being inauthentic in what they spoke about. Not that they were good at speaking, but that they weren't necessarily committed to the idea.
Right.
Is that true? I just make sure I'm not misunderstanding.
I don't think it's true. I think, again, that was Plato's version of them. And basically, the easiest way to think about it is cutting off ethics from technique. Like, ethics say you should believe in what you're arguing. You should argue only with certain techniques. You shouldn't try to manipulate people. You shouldn't use deception. And my brand of rhetoric is ethical only rhetoric. That's kind of one of the reasons why I like to do podcasts, is sort of get that concept out there that unethical techniques are as strong or stronger than ethical techniques. But the problem with when you start allowing politicians and people in public to use unethical rhetoric is that it really destroys your public discourse. So you can no longer figure out what's true or not true, especially now. It gets very complicated with deep fakes and 4K production and, all the different things that happen. And so if you go back to the sophists, traditionally the sophists have been slandered, I think, libeled with the idea that they were pure technique. They work for anybody. They don't care if you're right or wrong. You hire them, they'll teach you the techniques, which, that's partly true. That's what rhetoricians do. They study the techniques. So I've studied ethical techniques and I've studied unethical techniques. You can't hire me to do unethical techniques for you. You can hire me all day long to help you do ethical techniques. And most people don't know the distinction very well. So again, the sophists got slandered with, oh, you're just pure technique. You'll say anything for anybody. I'm not sure that's true. If you actually read the sophists, a lot of them had ethical foundations. But Plato had super ethics. He was very into ethics. So anybody who was underneath him, he kind of went after.
Well, but this is an important distinction because, like you said, if you're really good at persuasion, then you have a responsibility perhaps to try to be ethical because you have the potential to abuse and manipulate people who maybe aren't so good at rhetoric. I mean, kind of that's where cults come from, right? Right? Is you have persuaded somebody so deeply that they will even give up their own autonomy for an idea that isn't even good for them or even true. And obviously, like you said earlier, where we are now on Earth, let alone here we are in 2024, so it's a political year. We're going to have another president voted for, and so all we see is this sort of disparaging ad hominem attacks constantly on each other, and claiming a particular pejorative term towards somebody without having to prove it. It's easy to simply say, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, whatever. It's like it's easy to say.
Sure.
But shouldn't there be a sense that you need to prove that? Isn't that kind of what slander laws were for? Is you should be able to not disparage without proof, and it should be illegal. So help me kind of walk me through this rhetoric 101. So somebody's coming, I don't know if you teach in a university. I don't know if this is just your own personal courses that you put together. But if
I did, I was a professor for, off and on for 20 years. I taught the University of Texas at Austin and out here in California, Cal State Fullerton. So I've taught a lot of rhetoric courses.
Okay. So somebody comes to you, kind of pristine, tabula rasa, 18-year-old, just got out of high school, going to college for the first time in his life. He's actually going to maybe potentially think with agency and have access.
Sure, that'd be great. I like it already.
Yeah. So, and that's great. I mean, the university, historically was about free speech. Let's really examine everything and see what's out there. And that's, wow, so beautiful and important. But somebody comes to you from day one. People watching this podcast right now care about what's happening in this nation. They care about freedom, liberty, free speech. So what is it that you kind of begin to describe to your students or people that are participating in any of your gatherings or so forth? Like, what's the foundation for rhetoric? What do they need to begin to understand presuppositionally so they can begin to do it properly and foundationally and effectively? Kind of how do you start the ball rolling?
I think I kind of start with ethics in some ways because I tell people, because I'm on a lot of different podcasts, and I have a lot of different people on my podcast. And sometimes they're on the right, sometimes they're on the left. It doesn't matter to me. Like, ideologically, I don't really care what you believe. I don't care if you're religious or not religious. None of that matters to me as a rhetorician. What I care about is, do you use ethical persuasion techniques to try to further your position? And if you are using unethical persuasion techniques, then I will talk to you about what that means and how to maybe change that. And so when students come in, like, I always hook them with the same thing. I'm like, hey, let's say there are 1,000 persuasion techniques. There are 300 of them that I refuse to teach you. And they're all like, "What do you mean? You're the teacher. You got to teach us everything." I'm like, "No, you can't handle them. You're not ready for them. You know, they're very studyable. Like propaganda has been studied incredibly intensely. It's very well understood. And I'm like, I can teach you that stuff. I can teach you how to do propaganda. I can teach you how to do manipulation, but I'm not going to do it because the longest tradition in rhetoric, coming again from democracy of the Greeks, is that you should persuade, you should be a good person speaking well. That's the foundational definition that the Romans also picked up on for rhetoric. It's a good person speaking well. So you have good ethics and you can do good persuasion. If you have bad ethics, I don't want to teach you persuasion. I'll teach you ethical persuasion. Like even if you pick the worst idea about humanity, you're trying to pursue the worst program for human beings and humanism ever. If you are still doing it ethically, you're okay. Because then people can decide. You can say what your belief is. People can hear it. They can hear your evidence. They can investigate it, and they can make a decision. And that's the basis of democracy. If Americans tomorrow voted, I talked about this sometimes in my stand-up show, America's 51% female. And so if females wanted to run everything and just say only females can be in politics, all they have to do is vote. They literally have all the democratic power because they're the majority. So if they want to take power, just take power, just vote. Say men can't, so women couldn't vote for 244 years in this country when it first started. So say we're going to get reparations, men can't vote for the next 244 years. They could literally pass that and there's nothing men could do about it. But because they don't really understand democratic power, because it hasn't really been outlined in those kind of ways, they don't take that power. And so I think rhetoric is really good at showing you that, hey, pick what you want ideologically, use ethical techniques to try to get it. If you pick what you want ideologically and use unethical techniques to try to get it, it destroys culture. It destroys societies. And that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, obviously, with what you're saying, but it begs the question. I mean, it's impossible to even move forward with this conversation without the basic substructure of your premise, which is ethics. Now we have to then start with ground zero. Whose ethics? What ethics? What ethics are you discussing? What are you talking about? What is that presuppositional worldview that is ethical? Because clearly cultures historically have had different ethical standards. Now, if you're talking about the Greeks and their ethical standards and the many gods that they worshipped and whatnot, I'm curious, maybe we start there. If they were the precursors to where logic and reason and professional use of linguistics to persuade came from, then where did they get their ethical presupposition? What was that? And why should it be given weight?
Yeah, great. See, you're doing nice rhetoric. That's one of the things I like. I wanted to talk to you because I watched some of your podcasts and you're a very rational guy. You clearly, have an idea about sort of good discussion and doing some type of reasonable investigation of claims.
Are you trying to say I'm a genius or just
that's what
a beyond?
Yeah, you got to read between the lines.
Yeah.
Genius.
I mean, maybe a superior host, perhaps one of the greatest.
Superior being.
Okay, I just wanted to clear up the rhetoric. So okay, all right. So I'm this amazing host that has
amazing host.
Yeah, that has
the best I've ever heard.
Insight that you're probably curious. You're probably going to weep now when you realize how you'll never get to my standards. But I appreciate that. I mean, I do care about logic and reason. I do care about it. As a Christ follower, I believe in truth, absolute truth, immutable truth. It is the standard by which we move forward. I once read a book. I wish I'd had it with me. And I'm going to let you finish this question because it's crucial. But he asked this question. He I think he was a Catholic teacher. But anyways, his question was that he would pose to his students was, if somebody lies to you, are you still communicating? And he says, if you're having a conversation, somebody lies, are you still communicating? And he says, my premise is no, because you're withholding my access to reality. So you're no longer actually objectively communicating. So obviously when I have to presume, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm putting kind of presuming for your perspective, that ethical means honest, truth, basing on truth, not based on lies. Propaganda clearly is a misuse of words to create the illusion of reality when in fact you're lying to garner power. So tell me where the ethic um, of the Greeks came from, who established this, or if that's not really where we're going, if you want to say Western culture evolved beyond the Greeks into a wider margin of cultures, what is that standard and why should we care about it?
Yeah, every community is a collection. It's like a pie of slices of ethics and groups and perspectives, what you choose from. But there is no such thing as a homogenous culture. Like if you go in and you start looking at people's politics, looking at their religions, it's always a mix. It's just in some highly dominated cultures, you can't get other things through. So the Greeks were like the same thing. They were a mix. And one of the things that was super strong with the Greeks, and it's the reason why they grabbed so much attention in history, they were writers. So they logically thought things out and they wrote it down. Although Aristotle never wrote a thing. It was his followers who would write from his lectures. And so because of that, it could transcend other cultures. The Romans basically picked up all the Greek stuff and reused it. We now have picked up all the Greek stuff and reused it. The fact that people don't think they know rhetoric, like rhetoric was one of the first three things that you were taught as a Greek. You were taught logic, grammar, and rhetoric. Or logic, grammar, and rhetoric is a trivium. And so you were taught how to use words at the same time you were taught how to logically think. There was no separation. And we don't do that anymore. One of the reasons is that rhetoric over time became slandered as a field. Usually when people hear rhetoric these days, that word used, it's only in politics. They're like, oh, that's just empty rhetoric. That's just, war rhetoric or saber rattling. It doesn't mean anything. So it's this idea of hollow talk in politics. But that's only a tiny subset. That's just a little bit of unethical rhetoric. Rhetoric studies any way that human beings talk as they try to affect each other. And if you expand it enough, you start to realize every time you talk to somebody, you're trying to affect them. You're trying to be friendly. You're trying to get them to be friendly back. You're trying to give them information. They're trying to give you information back. We always have an agenda when we communicate. And even the word communicate the first time it was ever used is the idea of commune. And it was used in religious contexts. Like, how do we commune with God? Which means, how do we as physical beings use language to transcend some type of connection with a supernatural being? And we commune. When we reach there, we have communicated with people. And so the idea that if it's lies that breaks community, I think it's absolutely true. Like, you can't lie and still have effective communication, effective community in any society. And that's why so much of our public discourse right now is lies. It's based on deception. Even stuff that's not political. Everybody knows that an ad in capitalism is not true, right? You've become very used to watching people in McDonald's commercials take a bite of a hamburger and just have the most explosive reaction. Have you ever been into a hamburger like that? No. So we accept that a lot of our public discourse has deception in it. So we're kind of trained to not get that upset when politicians do it. So yes, the ethical foundations that you start from, super important because that attaches to the techniques that you use.
Well, and it is a tool, a formula of transferring ideas, which are transcendent. Thoughts are transcendent. They are not material. I think that's one of the proofs of God, is that we can think and have access to that which cannot be proven materially or scientifically, and yet we believe it comports to reality. So I think that certainly is a unique, transcendent access that the human has to God. But, it's kind of like I don't even want to say slippery slope, a higher wire act, because, to one person who might say this is a lie, another person might say, well, how about hyperbole? How about I'm just simply over dramatizing a concept to add some flavor to it, to add some zing to it, to create some intrigue that will draw you
Sure.
in, because ultimately I do want you to listen. And it's very much what you said to me about why we have rhetoric, why we discuss, is interesting, because I certainly don't believe that you're a Marxist necessarily. You might be, but of course Marx believed that everything was power struggle. Everything was power. And it's interesting the way you framed our conversations, as though we're always trying to get something or persuade.
Achieve something.
What's that?
With somebody. We're trying to achieve something with
We're
somebody.
trying to achieve, yeah. So that doesn't always mean it's nefarious, right? It could be just
No, not at all.
a kind thing. It could be simply maybe there's something beautiful about landing in the same space and communing with that simultaneously. There's something beautiful about that. But clearly, the issue at hand right now, I was going to say right now in America, but that's a little absurd. This has been the problem.
Yeah, it's endemic. It's always here.
Yeah, it's just humans want their point of view to be given precedent. They want it to be given weight. They want to be given it an authority that others don't have. But by the same token, Dan, if you have the truth, and that truth is necessary for a cohesive culture, and one that isn't going to become anarchy or destruction or a fighting or warring, then maybe there's value in persuading somebody to the truth, because it's our only hope, right? So how does one there are those who would say that to lie periodically is justified if it has a greater good. I must assume the Greeks would disagree with that. So I'm still staying within the perimeter of the ethical element. You keep using the word ethics because of what I said. I still think it's important that we just define what that means. Where does this ethics standard comes from? In other words, why should we not lie if it gets us what we want? That's a great use of rhetoric. Propaganda works. Why not use it? I win. So where does this ethic get such a transcendent power that we need to all bow the knee to it, irrespective of our philosophy?
Yeah, ethics is a very slippery concept. A lot of our concepts are slippery. They don't hold to definitions very well. They're easy to break. There's a great famous essay by Nietzsche that called The Truth and Falsity in an Ultra-Moralistic Sense. And basically what it argues is all language is an illusion. Words don't work very well. You can put multiple meanings in the same word. People can have different understandings of the same word. The word can suddenly shift meanings. So it's a very slippery, kind of broken technology. So there's falsity in everything you say because words aren't very good. In fact, philosophers will sometimes define what they do as that philosophy would not exist if language were better. Philosophy only needs to be around because language is such a bad vehicle. That's why a lot of times when you get into formal philosophy, it goes to numbers because numbers don't change.
Yeah.
Words change all the time. So yeah, you can go deep dive into the theory and sort of the complications of language and find a lot of answers to the things that we deal with every day. The fact that words don't work very well. And you're asking the right question. The very first move in rhetoric is you have to define your terms. And everybody has to agree to those definitions so that you can therefore communicate.
Right.
So the word ethics gets thrown around a lot and morals right next to it. And nobody really understands what that means. It gets, again, convoluted very quickly. But you're a Christian, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was raised Catholic. I went to Our Lady of Mount Carmel grade school and St. Francis de Sales all-boys high school. I was around a lot of Christianity and got trained to it a lot. And so it has a certain set of ethics, a certain way that you're supposed to live according to that intellectual structure. If you move outside of that intellectual structure, everything's back up for definition, and here you go. It's a brand new ball game. Suddenly we're over into Buddhism or we're into hedonism. they're just different options that you can move through. And a lot of what rhetoric does is sit between those things as they war for control. And, you know, Christians have dominated in religion. It's the biggest religion on the planet. And if you look at it rhetorically, well, why, you start to ask questions, well, why is that? What does Christianity offer rhetorically that other religions don't? And so you can get in and you can sort of look at it, you know, as it's a set of tools, it's a set of persuasions, and it's offering people things. If you start with Christianity and the Bible as part of your ethics, and you accept that, it changes the entire discussion versus we're going to start with like just pure logic and rationality. It has nothing to do with supernaturalism at all, because rationality has to start by moving supernaturalism out of the way, you know. And this is where the science, you know, and science and supernaturalism, science and religion fight kind of occurs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we started walking down this road in this conversation, we'll go deep. We'll go totally into philosophy, and I don't know that it will keep us on track to what I'm really curious about your strengths are. The reason I kept focusing on ethics was not to try to sort of make some kind of religious claim, though I would premise that one of the things that makes Christianity unique is that it deals with the Greek word logos, the word, as in flesh. Christ was the word. He created everything with words. That was
fascinating, right? Yeah, really interesting way it does that.
It's very much unique, and I just love how it seems to comport to reality. Like if you kind of take it seriously, it at least answers the questions that confound us, right? As far as, you know, why are we here? What is, and that's why I talked about the ethics in general, because there has to be a standard that transcends humans, only because humans have subjective desires that are in conflict. So unless there is a sort of ultimate, you know, mountaintop that we all sort of have to look at and say that's the standard, without that, I don't even know how rhetoric can ever work, because I can simply say you've won intellectually with the rhetoric, the rhetorical interchange, but I got bigger guns than you, so I still win. So it seems to me rhetoric is always presuming that there is a moral standard by which we will accept and even lay aside our own desires for a higher standard of truth and reality. And that's not going to happen, because humans want what they want. They are selfish. We want our own stuff. So that's why when I was asking about Greeks and their ethics, I was curious, because they were Christian. I mean, Paul at Mars Hill, of course, went to them, and that's where those guys would sit and talk and discuss and philosophy. And he said, you know, I saw your gods and they're interesting. I love that. He was a rhetorician, right? Hey, give them credit for what they got. I give you props for your things. God bless you. Notice you had one God there, the unknown God. Let me tell you about him. So it was an interesting conversation of philosophy and rhetoric. So, you know, where did the Greeks go, though, for their standard? Because they had to presume that it was a standard we all would agree on. So do you know what the standard was that they defined as ethical?
Yeah, they tended to rely on process as their God. So what rhetoric says is that nothing is ever stable. You never get the mountain where everything is agreed upon, and we all are using that to then sort of deduce how we should act. It's always in process.
Okay.
And that's therefore why they, you know, exalted logic, because logic was their ultimate, rationality was their ultimate process. It's like
so
the
they
best
were
thing
given
we've found.
that.
Yeah.
A standard of transcendence by which we will all agree to give authority to. We're choosing to agree this will be the authority figure, is logic and reason as its own agency.
Some of them, yeah. I mean, especially the educated ones. But again, there were lots of spiritualists in Greece. Lots of people would have never agreed to that standard. So it's always a pie. It's always in conflict with the other pieces of the pie to try to take over the pie.
Yeah.
That's the way I kind of think about it. Like rhetoric ultimately it's kind of a battle philosophy. It's a battle tool. It's like if I want to put forth my position more strongly and I want to do it ethically, then here's how I do it.
So let me ask you this. So we've kind of tried to get a little bit of a background for the foundations of the whole principle, the formula, and we all use it, even if we don't know or have been taught that formally. It's the only way you can communicate. So that was an interesting exploration when you mentioned about how words are kind of weak. Well, I'm not sure how else we communicate without words. I'm not sure. So I guess that's a little befuddling to me. What you mean by that? Unless you're saying define your terms. When my son was going off to college, I said, buddy, I don't know what they're going to teach you in school. I just know everything is leaning far, far left, and it's very much Marxist. It's very much nihilistic. It's very much postmodern. It's very much a very particular perspective. So the only thing I can tell you is if somebody starts having a conversation of which there is some friction, start with this. Define your terms. It's easy to say words. Love is love.
Excellent rhetoric advice.
Yeah, so I understand that we're talking about the same thing. You know what? I don't know if you're married, but all you have to do is be in a relationship with a woman over time, and you realize sometimes you argue about things that you agreed on, but you simply misunderstood the terminology. And so I'm talking around somebody simply because I didn't stop and say, wait a minute. When you say love, do you mean license? Do you mean no discipline? Do you mean no boundaries? Do you mean there is no saying no? Or do you believe love is so robust and so crucial that it has two sides? It has empathy and forgiveness and grace. Amen. It also says, and you'll be loyal and you'll do the right thing and you will censor yourself from certain behaviors for the sake of a greater good. That's, to me, is love, because it's in balance. Oftentimes, I find that people use words that are completely out of balance because it's not for promoting truth. It's for promoting a point of view and obscuring it in the word. And that's about as duplicitous as it gets, is you're actually using a word that we all hoped we could agree on and honored, and you used it to actually subversively interject a perspective that I disagree with, so you could fool me into following you into your rhetoric. And that's just evil to me. You owe me reality and the respect and the dignity of giving me the same access to that word as I'm giving you. Or because that to me is what makes humans unique. We have the spirit, we are made in God's image. So there is this, so truth is more important than winning. Truth is more important than my point of view. If my belief system is does not comport to reality, I change my belief system because I want truth. So, you come in, these students come into your class, you're trying to explain to them how this game begins. You've established where it comes from, why it works. It does, formal logic does work mathematically. So tell me, I guess, as we are in this presidential season, as certainly as you've watched what has happened in American academia and just in the rhetoric of the media and those who have the dissemination of information, what have you seen that has gone sideways and has been the most damaging abuse of rhetoric in the United States in the last, number of years?
Yeah, let me backtrack just a little, because you made a great point about why are you arguing? So I teach argument to a lot of people. I've been teaching it forever. Now I teach it to grown-ups instead of 18-year-olds, which is kind of fun. And there are two types of arguments at its foundation. There are two divisions. So there's heuristic argument, which is argument to win. It's based on conflict. That's what you see in court systems. heuristic from sort of Ares, which is the god of war. And a lot of people approach argument that way. They don't really care what happens as long as their point wins. And that's kind of what you're talking about when people change the definition of words on purpose to try to manipulate. On the other hand, there's truth-seeking argument, which is the way the Greeks and Aristotle defined it, where you just argue to try to get to the truth. It doesn't matter which one of you gets there. What matters is that you know how to do the process, again, that sort of use of process, to get to an answer that's true or best for people. Like, you're trying to find good outcomes in this argument. So if one person wins because they're more intellectual or better with rhetoric or better with words and definitions, and you see that a lot, it doesn't mean they get to the right answer. That means they were heuristically successful. They defeated the other person. It still doesn't mean it's a good answer. And argument is designed to get to the right answer, to get to a good answer. So when you ask about politics and what's happened to me, my foundational split is we have lost the ability to understand the difference between ethical and unethical rhetoric. It's become so fast out there, so many sources, so many topics. It's coming at us in so many directions that people can't slow it down. Like, even this, you and I are being very intellectual on this podcast, probably more so than 90% of the podcasts I do, and most people they can't tolerate the grind of doing rational discussion. Their brains just reject it. They're like, I got to get out of here. It's too fast. It's too much stuff, too much information. And you can't do logic lightly. Like, it doesn't work. That's why I said at the very beginning, it's a difficult technology. It breaks really easily. So in politics, which is the land of claim, not evidence, like when I teach people argument, there's a really great theoretician named Stephen Toulmin, and he basically broke out argument into, you need to see its parts. So claims, evidence, qualifiers, rebuttals, warrants, and conclusions. 6 stages. Any of those can be bad or good. But what's happened now, politics is just a land of claim. You can say whatever you want. Evidence is too hard. So they just make claims, either negatives about other people or positives about themselves. And everybody else the journalists, sort of rise up and go, where's the evidence? And they're like, nah, and they're on to the next topic. And in a land of claim, that's a very unethical public discourse landscape, because you no longer know what's true or not true. And so becomes very difficult to trust your public discourse on both sides.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's even more, I guess there's no reason to sort of lay extra responsibility on any group, I guess. What good is it? But in some odd, utopian, absurd, naive way, I would have hoped that journalists would have simply done what their job was, which is simply to convey the information and let the public decide, but don't obscure it. Don't take a side. Please be that fourth pillar and just give us the information. Please don't tell us that if we have discovered that for years ivermectin actually cured people of malaria, and it actually will help some of your friends and relatives who are in the hospital will be free from this COVID thing if they just are allowed to take this. And you say, no, you're not even allowed to talk about that. What? Can we talk about there just seems to be some inconsistencies in the election? Maybe it was on the up and up. But when you tell me I can't even bring it up, I have to assume there's something going on. I have to assume you're lying to me, even if you're not. So this is why, without an institutional conveyor and disseminator of information that we can trust, I don't know how you survive as a society. I really don't. Because
it's very difficult.
I don't know what you do. How do you not devolve into anarchy when you're not allowed to seek a common goal that we all can agree is for the common good? It doesn't exist. There is no common sense anymore because our senses are no longer in common. We now are choosing to say whatever my subjective perspective of myself is becomes a magical truth. If I identify as A, B, and C, I am. Now, if you want to live in that world, be my guest. That truly is what freedom is. But if you compel me to join you and I feel like this goes against my perspective of reality, you are stealing my dignity and my access to the way that I function. Why are you given that power and then call yourself the victim? You are so much far higher than me. You should appreciate this as a comic. In 2004, the New Yorker magazine did an 8-page profile about me, called me God's comic. That's where I got my nickname. New Yorker, not me. And it was during the Bush-Kerry political campaigns. And so the entire premise was, can a conservative Christian be funny? Okay, that's how biased and absurd these people are, that they get to be the arbiters of what is funny, But here's what I would always do, because I've done a million interviews about how come conservatives aren't funny. And I'm like going, what do you mean they're not funny? I've made a living doing this for 30 years. I've bought and sold 3 homes. I don't know how many cars, put my kids through school. So I'm getting paid for this many years for not being funny. So I must be the greatest con man of all time. I keep getting hired as a comic that's not funny, but he's a conservative and a Christian. No, I'm funny, but you can't laugh at yourself. The reason you can't laugh at yourself as a leftist is you've never had to. See, I'm a Christian conservative. I'm used to being the punchline. I'm used to it. And I can look at, Ricky Gervais, who's a great comic, and George Carlin, who's a great comic, and Dave Chappelle, who's a great comic, and Chris Rock, who's a great comic, and Lenny Bruce, and I can look at all these guys who oftentimes mock me and my people and still say that was funny. I don't agree, but that was funny because I appreciate the technique.
Right.
The left has never had to do that. They are systemically narcissistic. They will not allow themselves to be mocked because they act as children. And I've watched this happen over and over again. And they say to me, the reason conservatives aren't funny is because comedy is only funny if it punches up. And you guys, of course, take on the marginalized and punch down. I said, well, wait a minute. If you are a person who cannot be criticized, who gets your own parades, who gets your own flags, who gets to dance in front of children provocatively and not be called a pedophile, can put out pornographic literature for 6-year-olds in the library and not be arrested, I'd say you're about as up as it gets. You have a privilege I couldn't even conceive of. So maybe it's your turn to be punched. Maybe that's what it actually means. But when it comes to the actual doing of it, you don't want to participate because you're a coward and you don't actually believe in free speech. That's the power of comedy. And it's very powerful and frightening to those who aren't used to the ones being ridiculed. So what I'm curious about to you is, as we move forward into this season, of a new president or being elected, and we are at the most, I don't know if I've ever seen a more polarized America where people are literally moving away to particular parts of this nation that represents their point of view, and others, almost like a civil war is brewing. Give us some technique, some optimism, some hope, if it exists, as a rhetorician. How can we talk and communicate with those, especially that we're going to disagree with in our political point of view? That's healthy. That's helpful. Is it possible? And if so, show us how to do that. What would be your recommendations? So there you go. That's officially episode 1 of Dan French. I told you it'd be interesting because, listen, here's the key. If you are new to Brad Stine Has Issues, we are trying to not just give you information, but to teach you how to get better at being a believer, better at being a conservative, better at being philosophically astute, better at being unapologetic about your faith and truth, better about being educated and smart enough to understand and see through the lies and the deception of the left. And that's all they have is lies. Remember, they destroy everything they touch. They destroy. The academia has been completely annihilated in the United States. Harvard is a joke. It's all a joke. They destroyed psychology now. That is now going with critical theory and literally teaching people in therapy how to be activists. It's beyond a belief. World Health Organization medical association, no longer to be trusted in any way, shape, or form, completely politicized. They have destroyed and are continually destroy freedom, truth, liberty, and everything the West has created in thousands of years. And that's what their job is. So they can replace it with what? Nothing, just totalitarian rule, and you will be their slaves. I'm not going down without fighting. So this is just teaching us how to think, how to speak, how to be aware of how to better articulate your ideas. Remember, you're talking to people who believe logic is white and racist. Why? So they don't have to use it. Why? Because they don't know how. Why? Because if they did, they'd find out that everything they believe is full of crap. So here's what we're sitting at. Here's where we're at. And that's what we're trying to bring in. I will be here with part 2 next Monday. As you know, I am still starting my entire Pennsylvania tour tomorrow night. So go to bradstine.com. You can see everywhere I'm going to be. 5 different churches this week, starting tomorrow night, throughout Pennsylvania. So come on, get your tickets, or come to call in. Maybe it's a free event. That's up to them. Each one did it differently. But keep in mind, folks, that we are trying to fight, and we're going down swinging. I need you to join the Militia of the Mind. It's as simple as just giving us your email and your contact. So if I ever have to get a hold of you because they've thrown me off of these platforms, I can do it. If you want to give $36 for a whole year subscription and be able to get access to certain things you can't get without it, we could sure use you. You'll be part of the Mighty 10,000, and that's what this is, Mighty 10,000. And this is the Militia of the Mind logo. And if you want to be a Special Forces and whatnot, which we're going to talk about next week as to who the Special Forces have joined so far, you can also get the shirt that's signed by me with your number of part of the Mighty 10,000. So as you already saw, number 1 and number 2 today, we're going to have more and more as you send me your photos of you wearing the shirt. So folks, here we are doing the best we can fighting, and can't wait as the deal with Salem starts getting into play soon. In the next few weeks, we shall have our materials, our back catalog of this podcast on the Salem Podcast Network for their faith division. So we'll see what happens, but I need your prayers, I need your support, I need you to go find people to jump in with us, and we can grow this together organically, which is what we've done from the get-go. Wyatt, do you have anything to say, or have you completely fallen asleep?
Yeah, no, sorry, what now? I'm just too busy falling asleep.
Yes, well, you're good at falling asleep, you're great at falling asleep, you're busy falling asleep, and that's why they call it fast asleep, because not only do you do it quick. Folks, I appreciate you being with us, and we can't wait to give you more. We got some great guests already in the can and more coming, so just keep hanging on there and fighting the good fight with us. We will be there next week, so hi to all of you folks. Thank you for being part of it. This is God's Comic Brad Stine. If they say, hey, you're being politically incorrect, I always say thank you for the compliment, because PC free is liberty. And folks, this is God's Comic Brad Stine doing what I do best, putting the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday. And if you're in Pennsylvania, come see the show this week.